This assignment was emotionally taxing for me. I have never been more disgusted with people in my whole life. The ultimate successes experienced by the African Americans, as told in the reading and the videos, did little to alleviate the frustration that grew inside of me toward the evildoers in America's southern states in our nation's past, such as Bull Connor and Governor Faubus. I use the word frustration only because using the word hatred is not productive and should have no place in a scholarly assignment such as this one. The reason I had mixed emotions when reading about the ultimate successes of the African Americans in the book and in the videos is because I am acutely aware that the fight for racial equality still rages on. I am sure African Americans in America believe the fight will never end and that they will always be treated as subpar humans in our free nation. I am able to take the good from this assignment, but no matter what, I will be left with a terrible taste in my mouth. I suppose that may have been the intent of this assignment, to fully understand how terribly unfair it was and continues to be for African Americans in their pursuit of true equality. One thing I am sure of is that in both the efforts related to integrating the Central Little Rock High School and the efforts of the Freedom Riders, those involved did not know just how hard their task would be. I believe they realized the visceral hate possessed by many white Southern Americans, but they did not realize the extent to which those hateful people would be willing to go to get their way. Also, those involved in the integration efforts at both the schools and the buses did not predict that those in power would be so ambivalent towards their cause, especially the ones that claimed to support them, such as John F. Kennedy, thus exacerbating the situation. To be clear, I believe the people of this movement, including Thurgood Marshall, Charles Houston, the Little Rock Nine and their families, and the Freedom Riders, knew their cause would be tough. To say otherwise is an insult to them. What they couldn't predict is how determined evil people can be when they get scared by the prospect of change. They didn't realize how strong a catalyst fear is to evil people. To the extent which the segregationists in Little Rock went to protect their hateful way of living was vile to the core. Before reading the book, I was aware of the attitudes held by racist white Southerners, but I took their savvy for granted. For example, I never would have guessed the leaders of the segregationist movement employed psychologists to meet with the students and the families of the Little Rock High School to plot diabolical schemes to undermine the psyche of the 9 African American students in an attempt to manipulate their actions in a way that would get them kicked out of school and thus thwart the integration movement, as Melba Beals described in the book. Other examples from the book, such as the glass shards placed in the peanut butter on Melba's assigned seat, or the bloodlusting mothers who climbed the school's fence to chase after Melba during one of her first gym classes, also helped to paint me a broader picture of the hellish scenario in Little Rock in the late 1950s. I mentioned John F. Kennedy earlier, and I'd like to expand on that. The Kennedys initially viewed the civil rights movement as a nuisance. I believe most public officials, even those who claimed or who were or claimed to be fair-minded, actually shared this view. It should go without saying that the less fair-minded public officials of the southern states use a much stronger word than annoyed when talking about the movement. Either way, I believe these public officials that were good in heart felt this way because they knew how deeply ingrained racial hatred was amongst large swaths of the American public, and they knew how hard the fight for racial equality would be. In effect, they were annoyed by the thought of hard work, rather than the idea of racial equality. Beyond being annoyed, Kennedy went as far as to demanding a cooling-off period at one point for the Freedom Rides that were taking place, even calling them unpatriotic because they embarrassed the nation on the world stage at the height of the Cold War. This annoyance that public officials felt toward the issue and the avoidance tactics that they employed is unforgivable, just as racism and segregation is unforgivable. In the eyes of history, it is glaringly obvious to see that no person in power during this time was innocent. No, there were only people that were less guilty. With all the trouble minority groups have gone through and continue to go through to receive an education equal to the majority of American whites, I believe it is the duty of teachers and administrators to assist in the efforts and protect those who have trouble protecting themselves. This seems like an obvious statement, but the school staff at Little Rock Central High School failed miserably at upholding this duty. To those who say they were a product of their time, I say nonsense. The school staff was well educated, and many of them did not agree with segregationists. With the exception of Vice Principal Huckabee, who still could have done more herself, the Little Rock school staff only protected themselves and their careers during the whole ordeal. Nowhere in the book does Melba mention a staff member stopping the violence incurred on the 9 African American students. Not once. I do remember reading one of the teachers who didn't put up with rude comments in her class, but that was only to keep order in her room. Sure, the staff members were being threatened behind the scenes, but at the same time, Melba's mother Lois fought for her daughter's inclusion at Central High School to her own detriment professionally. When threatened with losing her job, she could have pulled Melba from Central High School, but she didn't. She took a stand when her job was on the line. The teachers at the Central High School did not. This judgment of mine could be argued for hours, as one could easily claim that Lois was a mother of one of the integrating students, and the Central High teachers did not have a son or daughter involved, and that is why they were unwilling to stick their necks out. That explanation is still not good enough, in my opinion. Teachers have a duty to do good and protect their students as part of their civil service job, and the Central High teachers failed in that respect. Modern-day educators still have an opportunity to do good and protect marginalized students in light of negativity, similar to that which existed in the 1950s. At my school, a student called a Latino peer Speedy, as in Speedy Gonzalez, in front of me earlier this year. I stopped class, and I called that offending student out in front of his peers. The student could not even look me in the eye, so I told him to. I reprimanded him and explained why I was doing it. I did this in front of the whole class to send a message that this type of racist behavior would not be tolerated by me and that it should not be tolerated by anybody. What's sad is I'm pretty sure the name-calling persists, just not in front of me anymore. To the larger point, though, the name-calling does not happen in my room. Imagine if every teacher did the same thing. It would lead to a safer and more equal learning environment for the minority students in question. You may be thinking that every teacher is doing the same thing I did. Unfortunately, this is not true. In fact, our Phi Ed teacher calls the same student Speedy. When I heard it, I couldn't believe it. I brought this to the attention of our administrator, but nothing has been done, and I don't believe anything will be done. I even asked the Phi Ed teacher why he uses that derogatory term, and he claims that it's all in good fun. I'm just going to be truthful here. I had little respect for that teacher beforehand, and his response to my question erased any remaining respect. This example is not an isolated one, only at our school. This kind of behavior exhibited by professional teachers still exists today, thus proving we all have a lot more work to do.